The floors of Greenwood Springs Tech Center were cool to the touch, at dawn smooth marble veined with gray, like old river stones. The lights hadn't yet flickered to full brightness. Only a faint hum drifted from the server rooms, a heartbeat beneath the concrete. At 4:58 a.m., Elena Mendes arrived exactly as she had for the last 6 years. The concourse level service entrance clicked behind her as she slipped in navy windbreaker, clinging softly to her shoulders. The windbreaker had once been crisp. Now its cuffs bore the faded edge of a life lived in quiet repetition. She clocked in no greeting, no nod from the empty hallway. The supply cart waited in its usual spot, metal wheels slightly askew, a familiar companion. Elena placed her well-worn thermos on the shelf, adjusted her janitorial badge, still spelled Ilana, a mistake never corrected, and began her ritual. This was her sanctuary, a building still half asleep. She cherished the empty corridors, the gleam of polished glass, untouched by careless hands. Language was her comfort, her private world, words in 9 tongues whispered beneath her breath as she worked. No one knew. No one asked. That was how it had always been. By 5:40 a.m., she was in the southwest atrium, mop gliding in precise strokes. The pattern was muscle memory, left to right, one breath per pane of marble. The click of her soles echoed faintly. At 5:42, as every morning, she wiped down the espresso bar counter. The stickiness of spilt syrup and hurried double shots didn't faze her. Routine was a language too, one she spoke fluently. By 6:10, fresh tulips replaced the wilting ones by reception. No one noticed. Elena did it for herself, unable to tolerate faded beauty. The world upstairs was still dreaming. The one downstairs had already begun to sing. Elena saw them all, the interns sneaking protein bars, the marketing team's loud laughter, the temp who left sticky note quotes, progress, not perfection. Elena read every one. She didn't laugh at the jokes. She didn't take the bars, but she remembered the words. Her name didn't appear on emails or meeting invites. She had no desk, no voice in the monthly newsletter. Yet she spoke 9 languages: Mandarin, Spanish, French, Portuguese, German, Arabic, Italian, Swahili, and Latin. Latin didn't count, she'd often tell herself, a scholar's relic, but it still lived inside her like a moth in an old drawer. At 6:26 a.m., while dusting a glass conference room, Elena noticed a young man beneath the table, tangled in frustration. Fingers flew over a tablet, headphones askew. Adrian Lee, IT intern. He hadn't noticed her until a gentle tap on the table drew his gaze. "You're looking for the Xcode patch file?" "Yes," Elena asked, voice calm, her Spanish-tinged accent softened by time. Adrian blinked. Yeah. How? I've seen it before." "There's a missing tilde in your string," she said simply. He stared. "You know terminal commands?" She shrugged. "I listen well." He typed. It worked. His shoulders sagged in relief. "Thanks." What's your name again, Elena?" she replied softly, already moving on. By 6:47, she was back in the supply room folding microfiber cloths. Her hands moved with certainty, used to being invisible, always observing. Outside, the day began. Heels clicked, gates beeped, coffee machines hummed. The world stirred, but no one noticed the woman who had polished its surfaces and solved its puzzles, not yet. And then came the spill. A visitor from Seoul arrived, soft-spoken, middle-aged. As he approached the desk, a paper coffee cup trembled in his hand, liquid cascading over the edge of the sleek terso floor. The receptionist barely glanced up. Security was absent. Elena moved before she was called. Wordlessly, she pressed a folded cloth into his palm and knelt to absorb the spill. Then in crisp, gently accented Korean, she said, "It's no trouble. You're safe here." The man's eyes widened, not at the gesture, but at the precise cadence of her words. He bowed slightly. She returned the bow and disappeared into the hallway. The moment lasted seconds, but not for everyone. Behind a potted fern, 3 employees from communications had been watching. "Did our janitor just speak Korean?" One whispered, half laughing. Another held up a phone. "No way! I'm recording this." They uploaded it to After Hours Antics, the company's private Slack channel. Caption level 99, "Janitor multilingual for mops." Within minutes, the clip was climbing in views. No one asked her name. No one asked the visitor's reaction. Elena didn't see the video. She didn't need to. She'd seen that kind of laughter before in other countries' other uniforms. Later in her supply room, she stared at a worn photo of her mother taped inside the door. Her mother's voice echoed softly, "Language is how we say I see you, mija." Outside, the world was waking fast, the first ripples of a tide about to break. But everything was about to change. By sunrise, the building stirred with new energy, the kind that crept beneath the surface rather than announced itself. Whispers curled like steam from the espresso machines. A video, a laugh, a joke at someone else's expense. Elena Mendes had already cleaned 3 floors by the time her name, or rather her image, entered circulation in a Slack thread she would never see. Inside conference room 2B, Lana from communications was already on her second iced latte, watching the reactions roll in. "People are eating it up," she said, smirking to a colleague across the table. Janitor speaks fluent Korean, feels like a bit from a sitcom. Greg, who had uploaded the video, offered a thin laugh. "It's harmless. Everyone's loving it." "No harm," Lana said, twirling her straw, "just hilarious." They didn't notice Adrian pause in the doorway, tablet in hand. He watched the loop again, Elena kneeling, hands steady, voice soft and precise. The caption mocked what he had felt that morning, quiet awe. But it was too late. The moment had already been reduced to content. Downstairs at the concourse level, Elena moved as she always did, efficient, deliberate, unseen. But something in the air felt brittle. The way an elevator dinged, then closed without waiting. The way the receptionist didn't glance up when she replaced the tulips. Eyes passed over her faster, or maybe now they lingered just a bit too long. At 10:17 a.m., her supervisor summoned her. "HR wants to talk." He muttered, not unkindly, just awkward. "Conference room 7A. Elena nodded, folded her gloves into her back pocket, and walked the full length of the east hallway. Her soles barely made a sound on the tile. She passed employees she recognized by scent, by stride, by whispered phone calls, none of whom had ever asked her name. Conference room 7A was all chrome, and silence, a room designed for formality, not comfort. Inside, 2 women stood waiting. Cynthia Harrow, Senior VP of Corporate Standards, was polished in that meticulous way that always felt like a rebuke. Beside her sat Lana, now composed, phone, tucked away, lips pressed together in a line that resembled concern, but wasn't. Cynthia didn't sit. "Miss Mendes," she said, no warmth in her voice. "We've been made aware of a video circulating through internal channels." Elena's hands remained folded. "Yes," she said simply. "You engaged with a visitor in Korean." "He spilled coffee," Elena replied. "I assisted." "In his language." Cynthia's jaw shifted slightly. "That isn't part of your designated responsibilities." "I was helping. But in doing so," Lana cut in, "you created confusion. Boundaries between departments matter. When someone speaks on behalf of the company, I didn't speak on behalf of anyone," Elena said. "I spoke to him, as a person." There was a pause. Cynthia lifted a tablet, pressed play. The video filled the screen, soundbite, subtitles, chuckles. The caption, "Level 99, Janitor, Korean, Unlock Cutscene." Elena watched it without expression. "You understand how this can be perceived as unprofessional?" Cynthia asked, brows tight. "No," Elena answered. "I understand how it can be perceived as unfamiliar." The silence that followed was cold and clinical. Cynthia shifted gears. "We're asking you to resume duties without further unsanctioned interactions. For now, all contact with external guests should be deferred to proper channels." Elena tilted her head. "I never left my duties." Lana opened her mouth, then shut it. There was nothing left to say that didn't sound petty. Cynthia smoothed the edge of her blouse. "This isn't punitive, Miss Mendes. It's a matter of consistency." Elena's eyes drifted to the table, to a branded notepad and silver-embossed Lumisoft pen. She reached forward slowly, not to take but to borrow. One quiet motion, one steady line. She wrote, "Humility isn't weakness, and fluency isn't arrogance." She capped the pen and left the paper where it lay. "I'll return to my post," she said softly, and walked out. The hallway felt colder. The glass walls reflected her differently now, not invisible, but distorted. She passed 2 interns. They whispered. She didn't flinch. That was the thing about language, it taught you when to speak and when silence had its own power. Back in the utility closet, she rinsed microfiber cloths by hand, the water lukewarm and slow. The photo of her mother hung where it always had, tape yellowing, smile faint. Elena touched the edge gently. Language is how we see each other, her mother had said. But some only hear when the volume is cruel. She whispered a phrase in Swahili under her breath, one that meant I will not shrink. Outside, the floor buzzed with meetings and coffee runs. No one mentioned the video aloud anymore. That didn't mean it had gone away. It meant it had started working. The dawn after the HR meeting arrived gray and humid. Rain whispered against the glass facades of Greenwood Springs Tech Center, thin streaks distorting the city skyline beyond. Elena Mendes arrived 2 minutes early as always. If her shoulders were heavier, she didn't show it. She moved through her usual route, Southwest Atrium Espresso Bar. Reception flowers, not emotion wasted. But now the invisible currents around her had changed. Conversations hushed when she passed. A nod from a designer who'd never acknowledged her before. A door held open by an intern. Little shifts flickering and uncertain like light underwater. In her supply room, the worn photo of her mother greeted her with its silent reminder. Language is how we say I see you. Elena did not want to be seen like this, a curiosity, a talking point. Yet invisibility was no longer hers to claim. By 7:14 a.m., the elevator dinged earlier than usual. Isabelle Fournier, CEO of Lumasoft's North American operations, stepped into the lobby, no makeup, black slacks, cream blouse, jet lag in her eyes. She was not here to make an entrance. But the moment she entered, she heard it. A voice, soft, flowing, fluent German, not from a concierge, not from a translator, but from the far corner of the lobby. Elena stood beside a man in a Navy tech jacket, gesturing toward the third-floor engineering wing. Wenn Sie dort entlang gehen, finden Sie die richtige Abteilung direkt neben dem Serverraum. If you go that way, you'll find the right department next to the server room. Her tone was precise, unforced. The visitor nodded in relief, offering a grateful smile before walking off. From where she stood, Isabel watched as if glimpsing a hidden doorway within her own building. She approached quietly. You speak German? She said not a question, but an observation layered with quiet awe. Elena straightened, startled. Yes, ma'am. I didn't mean to disturb the lobby. You didn't, Isabel replied. What's your name, Elena? Elena Mendes. Isabel's gaze remained steady. That was quite a translation. I just pointed him to where he needed to go, Elena answered simply. In German. He seemed anxious. I thought it would help. Isabel tilted her head, appraising. Do you work in facilities? I clean the common areas. And you speak? How many languages? Elena answered softly without hesitation. German, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Portuguese, Arabic, Italian, Swahili. I can also read Latin, but I don't count that. There was no boast in her voice, no plea, just fact. Isabel blinked once. Would you mind coming with me? Elena hesitated, one hand gripping her cart instinctively, as though she needed permission to leave it. Isabel's tone softened. Just for a few minutes. With a slow nod, Elena followed. The executive elevator was unfamiliar. Her badge wouldn't scan here, but today, Isabel pressed the button and held the door. Inside, polished steel reflected two silhouettes, one crisp, one work-worn. Halfway up, Isabel spoke without turning. How long have you been here? 6 years. And always work nights, I prefer it. It's quieter. I imagine it is, Isabel murmured. When the elevator stopped, they stepped into the executive floor marble tiles, soft beneath their feet. The air scented faintly of eucalyptus and wealth. Elena kept her eyes low, not from fear, but reflex, the habit of shrinking into corners. Inside Isabel's glass-walled office, the CEO motioned to a seat across from her desk. Elena sat gingerly, gloves folded in her lap. Behind Isabel, a world map spanned the wall, dotted with pins in red, blue, and silver. Elena's eyes drifted to them, quietly cataloging the regions by language group. Isabel leaned against her desk, arms crossed. I didn't expect to have this conversation today. Elena smiled faintly. Neither did I. How does someone with your fluency end up cleaning floors? Elena exhaled, slow and even. Life. I was in university once, linguistics major, top of my class. Then my mother got sick. I dropped out to care for her. We moved here. I raised my daughter. I worked what I could, and you kept studying. Languages don't leave you, Elena said softly. Not if you love them. Isabel was quiet. The truth was too unadorned for pity. I'm not asking for anything, Elena added. I've made peace with where I stand. Isabel leaned forward. That may be, but perhaps it's time we asked more of the people we failed to see. No grand offer was made that moment. No contract signed, just a seed planted in silence. 2 days later, as whispers swirled through open concept offices, an internal memo appeared. Ms. Mendes has demonstrated capabilities Lumisoft too often overlooks. Effective immediately, she will serve as interim global communication advisor. True capability isn't always credentialed, nor does it arrive in business casual. Isabelle Fournier. Some scoffed, some applauded, but beneath the noise something deeper shifted, respect born not from title, but from grace under scrutiny. And Elena. She requested to keep her cart and closet not from pride, but remembrance, because dignity once spoken does not forget its first language. The boardroom on the 15th floor was colder than it needed to be. Air conditioning hummed softly above the long glass conference table, around which sat 12 men and women in dark suits, their faces composed, their eyes calculating. It wasn't the size of the room that made Elena Mendes pause when she stepped in. It was the silence, a silence dense with expectation, the kind that gathered not from reverence but from uncertainty. Word had spread through Lumisoft like wildfire. The janitor, No, the global communication advisor, now had been called to sit in on the most delicate negotiation the company had faced in months, the Moroccan expansion deal. Weeks of miscommunication had stalled progress. Translations had fallen flat. Contracts had been combed over, yet nuance was missing, the kind of nuance that no automated tool or textbook phrasing could capture. Their original interpreter had backed out last minute. It was Adrian Lee who had spoken first in the emergency planning meeting. We should ask Elena. There had been laughter, then silence, then finally a quiet nod from Isabelle Fournier. So did I, she had said. Once. Let her speak. And now Elena stood at the door, notebook in hand, blazer, slightly too big at the sleeves, badge, still unchanged, Elena Mendes janitorial services. She moved without hesitation to her seat, second from the left, and sat spine-straight, notebook closed before her. Around her the room buzzed faintly with side conversations. A few skeptical glances flickered her way. She mops floors, someone had muttered earlier that morning. Not loud enough to confront, but not quiet enough to forget. The Moroccan delegation arrived, 3 representatives led by Mr. Fahim Ben Youssef, a seasoned negotiator with salt and pepper hair, and Ms. Samira El Fassi, a poised woman in a crimson headscarf. They exchanged polite greetings in French first, a language Elena spoke with ease, though she remained silent. She waited, observed. The opening statements began contractual clarifications, delivery schedules, legal stipulations. The conversation was cordial but strained. Then it happened. A side comment from Mr. Ben Youssef, casual, phrased in Daria, the Moroccan dialect of Arabic. An aside meant for his colleague, words no one else in the room seemed to catch. Their words read right but feel wrong, like shoes a size too small. Elena's gaze lifted. She smiled gently. In fluent Daria, she replied, "Perhaps we should tailor the words, not the foot." The room froze. Mr. Ben Youssef looked up sharply, brows raised, then slowly a smile spread across his face. "You speak with care," he said in Arabic. "I speak with respect," Elena answered, tone warm, pace measured. Miss El Fassi laughed softly, eyes bright. "Finally," she said also in Arabic, "someone who speaks to us, not just at us." And just like that, the meeting changed. Where once there had been stiffness, now there was flow. Elena facilitated each point of clarification, not merely translating but bridging intent and tone. When Mr. Ben Youssef joked about idioms lost in contracts, Elena answered in kind, weaving a local proverb that made the Moroccan delegates chuckle genuinely. Around the table, American executives leaned forward, unconsciously drawn not to novelty, but to the undeniable presence Elena commanded. Respect, dignity, true understanding. By the end of the session, the Moroccan team had not only agreed to proceed, but had offered stronger partnership terms on the condition that future communications be reviewed by someone who understood their language. When the room emptied, Mr. Ben Youssef approached Elena privately. Hand over heart, he said softly, "No one here has ever spoken to us like that. Not in our language. Not like that." Elena nodded, eyes kind. "Because no one asked what language you think in." He smiled. I will remember this. Later back on the executive floor, Isabel entered Elena's small nook behind the IT wing, holding a new ID badge. I thought you might like to see this, she said, voice warm. Elena looked down. Elena Mendes, Director of Cross-Cultural Insight. She traced the letters lightly. I didn't expect this. I did, Isabel replied. Elena smiled softly. May I still keep my closet downstairs? Isabel laughed. You can do whatever you like. But Elena already knew some spaces were worth keeping as reminders, because dignity once spoken never forgets its first language. The chair remained empty long after the meeting had ended, not out of disrespect, not out of neglect, but because no one dared to sit in it. It was the second seat from the left in Training Room Delta, a simple black ergonomic swivel, no different from the others. And yet by the end of Elena Mendes' final presentation that spring, the chair had become untouchable. She hadn't noticed at first. Elena never studied her own seating, but Adrian Lee, standing in the back corner among interns, did. He watched the shift unfold one quiet gesture at a time. The final session had ended on a clear note. Elena, in her worn navy blazer, had closed her notebook, risen from the seat, and thanked the room in 3 languages, French, Arabic, and English. Language is not a code, she had said softly. It is a bridge between presence and understanding. She adjusted her sleeves, offered a small smile, and walked out. And yet that chair stayed slightly turned askew, as if marked by her presence. By the following afternoon, an unspoken rule had taken hold. No one moved it. No one sat in it. Even during crowded sessions, one seat remained vacant. It wasn't about fear. It wasn't about reverence. It was about remembering. Upstairs in the executive floors, her new title, Director of Cross-Cultural Insight, appeared quietly in company updates. Her badge had finally been corrected, but Elena had asked to keep her closet on the concourse level. I'm not done down there, she'd told Isabel. Not yet. Isabel had simply nodded. In that familiar supply room, the mop still stood in its corner. Microfiber towels were still neatly folded, and on the top shelf a small brass nameplate rested, a gift from Adrian and a few others. She made us listen, it read. One afternoon, while restocking supplies, Elena found a folded note tucked between cloths. Thank you for speaking with dignity when the rest of us were still speaking in fear. No signature. Hesitant handwriting. Elena smiled and placed the note inside her worn blue idiom notebook. Some days later, a newly hired assistant, nervous and unsure, nearly sat in the second seat during a training session until they noticed a slip of paper tucked beneath the cushion. Unfolding it, they read, Speak kindly, listen fully. Remember, talent does not need a title to matter. No name. But everyone knew who had written it. The whispers continued, but no longer laced with mockery. They carried respect, humility, sometimes even regret. Greg, who had first recorded the video, now avoided watching it. When he did mute it without the laughing captions, he finally heard what had been there all along, not novelty, but kindness. She didn't need our approval, he later told Adrian quietly. She made us aware. Across the company, small changes took root. Executive teams began including cultural insight briefings in international negotiations. Language training budgets increased. Employees requested to shadow Elena during sessions, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity. And Elena, she continued her work with Lumasoft's European partners, consulting across offices in Berlin, Rotterdam, Lisbon. Her voice appeared in company-wide memos, sometimes in 4 languages, sometimes in 1. Always precise, always thoughtful. But one thing remained unchanged. The supply closet downstairs still untouched. Still hers. When an eager HR coordinator asked if they should reassign the space, Isabel answered simply, No, some spaces aren't just functional, they're sacred. In quiet moments, interns would pass the closet and pause, sometimes slipping a sticky note beneath the door. Short phrases in different languages, merci, gracias, shukran, zisha. Thank you. Elena read each one, not to collect praise, but to remind herself that bridges had been built one word at a time. As the months passed, the second seat from the left remained empty during every session, not out of obligation, but out of honor. And when new hires asked why, sometimes Adrian would answer, sometimes Isabel, Because they would say she didn't sit there to be seen. She sat there to remind us who we weren't seeing. One rainy morning, as a nervous intern prepared for their first international call, they slipped into training room Delta. On the seat, they found another folded note left quietly by Elena before flying out once more. Language is how dignity introduces itself. And somewhere deep beneath Greenwood Springs Tech Center in a supply closet, lit by a single flickering bulb, the mop and notebook remain silent witnesses to a truth once overlooked. Because sometimes the most powerful seat in the building is the one no one dares to fill.